Hi, I'm Allison Hawkins with the Alliance for Charitable Reform, and I'm here with Evan Liddiard. He's a tax consultant with Urban Swirsky and Associates, and today we're going to be talking about tax reform and some comments that have been made by congressional leadership on certain elements of tax reform as things heat up this year. Welcome, Evan.
Good to be with you.
Good. So earlier this week, Senator Max Baucus, who is the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, he's a Democrat out of Montana, made some comments about tax reform and what might be happening this year and what he'd like to see as goals for tax reform for this year. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Well, he laid out his vision for tax reform from the Finance Committee's point of view this week and set out what he'd like to see as goals for tax reform.
Okay, and what did those goals include?
There were 4 goals, specifically jobs and growth, competitiveness for the economy, the U.S. economy versus others in the world, innovation, and opportunity. He said those would be the things he'd like to see from tax reform next year.
And did he provide any details on how we can accomplish those things, how we can increase competitiveness or innovation, or how that gets done through taxes?
Not totally. He didn't give a lot of detail, and nobody thought he would. He laid out the fact that he's been talking with his membership on both sides of the aisle about tax reform and trying to get consensus. He's a very much consensus-seeking chairman, as he has to be in the Senate, and how the staff has been working on options and that they want to move forward next year with tax reform.
Okay. And why would he do this now? Why would he go out and speak about this now when, the lame duck session is a long ways away? Tax reform is very likely not going to happen this year, right?
Right. Well, there's a couple of reasons. There's a lot of talk about the uncertainty being caused to the economy now because of what they're calling tax-mageddon, all the changes and things expiring at the end of this year. And the Ways and Means Committee has been out there talking about tax reform for quite some time. And that's, of course, on the House side. The Senate side has something to say about it as well. So I think he wanted to let everybody know that, yes, indeed, the Senate is looking at this as well, and will have something to contribute for tax reform when the time comes.
So this was more of a symbolic gesture, a way for him to say that we are working on these issues. Here are our principles. We hope to consider these as we move forward, correct?
I think so, and nobody expected him to put a lot of detail out simply because of this election season. It's not smart to put a lot of things out there that could end up hurting him and others during the election. For example, if they want to lower the rate like they're talking about, that means and keep it revenue neutral or actually raise revenue, there'll be some tax expenditures that'll be eliminated, which could hurt people and cause a lot of opposition. And you don't want to have that opposition come up prematurely and kill whatever chances you might have for your ideas.
So this is why we're not doing this before Election Day in November, correct?
That's the main reason. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So will this happen in November? Will this happen next year?
There's some discussion that in the lame duck session we could have moved towards tax reform. The Ways and Means Committee chairman has actually talked about setting forward some kind of fast track procedure during lame duck that tax reform could be considered next year under those procedures with up and down votes and things like that, such as we do with trade provisions. And whether or not that's possible remains to be seen, but that's some ideas that are being talked about.
So it's important for us to are you saying it's important for us to get our ideas to Congress now, or should we wait until November?
No, now's the time because a lot of details are being drafted by staff behind the scenes. Plans are being drawn up and considered. They may not necessarily see the light of day, but if someone has concerns about what might happen, now is definitely the time to go talk with members of Congress and their staff about them.
Is the charitable deduction or incentives for the charitable sector, are they in play here? Is this something that we should be worried about?
I think it is. I think it is because many of on the Democratic side would like to see the tax code produce more revenue. One way of doing that would be to do exactly what President Obama suggested, and that is to limit the value of itemized deductions, including the charitable contribution, to 28%. That would raise hundreds of billions of dollars and would help achieve the goal of some who want to see more revenue.
And within those itemized deductions is contributions for charity.
That's correct.
So that is why that could be involved.
And for those who are in the higher tax brackets than 28%, could find the value much limited and therefore less of an incentive to give.
And which will in turn impact charities. People could end up giving less money to charities. So this is important for both charities and for those who are giving the money away, the philanthropists, to go to Congress and send them the message that this is very important, right?
That's exactly right.
Now to pivot to the other comments that Senator Baucus made this week, he talked about some tax incentives for business. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, in fact, he mentioned it in his speech on Monday on tax reform too, and that is the provisions that have expired or are going to be expiring at the end of this year. They're known as the extenders, and there are dozens and dozens of these. It grows every year. It's a list of provisions, many of which, as I said, expired at the end of last year, and they're left in limbo because this has happened before, and Congress has always come back and retroactively extended them. And
Done patchwork, basically.
many members on both sides of the aisle would like to see it happen again this year as soon as possible. And so there's lots of consensus that it ought to happen, but there are some very sticky problems for making it happen, such as how to pay for them or whether to even offset the cost. And whether or not there might be some other political implications brought into the debate that make it impossible to pass it this year.
So why is it important for us? Why do we care about business tax incentives on the charitable sector side? Why should we be caring about that Baucus is talking about this? How does this affect us?
Well, everything that's happening in the tax legislative world is interconnected these days, and tax reform may seem like it's around the corner, or it may seem next year. Mm-hmm. It all depends. Nobody can predict what the lame duck might hold, what the election will hold, how next year is going to look. So to really watch this and to see what might happen, you have to kind of see all of it. You can't just say,
right,
well, if it's business, we can forget about it, because it'll all be interconnected when they do tax reform.
So to pay for one tax incentive might require the cost of another tax incentive. So
that's right.
These are things that we have to pay attention to.
And there are those that want to see business tax reform only, but others say that's not going to happen because the individuals out there that aren't happy with their own tax situation aren't going to sit back and say, well, why did you take care of the business's taxes but not ours?
Yeah. So before we wrap up here, why is it significant that Chairman Baucus had something to say this week? I mean, we all know the politicians like to talk, and they talk all the time. So why is it significant that Chairman Baucus is making these comments?
Well, he's one of the main players in tax reform, being chairman of the Finance Committee, and no matter what happens with the election, he'll still be the leader of the Democrats for the Finance Committee. He'll either be the chairman or the ranking member, and he's a major player, and what he says makes a big difference, particularly on the Senate side. And he's one that likes to get consensus from both sides of the aisle, and that's necessary in the Senate. So what he says is very significant.
Great. Well, we'll be keeping our eye on this. Anything else that comes from Senator Baucus or anything else that comes from the Hill that could be important for charity. And we'll report on those as we get those developments.